Hey everyone, we're live at bullbuster.net, and today we're going to cover the ultimate guide to braided fishing line, and that's everything you need to know about braided fishing line. You probably know something about braided fishing line, and some of these things you already know, and some of them you won't. So some will be a review, and some might be new. So, why is braided fishing line awesome? Really, one of the reasons is it's extremely thin for how strong it is. So you can fit a lot more line on your reel, and oftentimes you can catch bigger fish on a smaller reel. And I believe there's a company, let's say, I believe it's Accurate that really talks about that a lot. It's like using small reels to catch big fish, and that's just really what reel companies had to do is once Braid came out, and it's been a little while, and a lot of them have updated since then, but they had to upgrade the drags for the reels because now the line was more powerful for they could fit on a smaller spool, so the drag needed to be upgraded to handle that type of pressure. The brakes on the car, the gears had to be the little discs had to be updated. So yeah, Braid is extremely thin for how strong it is, and that thinness gives it some unique advantages over monofilament fishing line. All right, so braid also has very little stretch. So that's an advantage when you are, let's say, you're daytime sword fishing and you're dropping your bait 1,800 feet down, and you want to feel a bite. That's a good thing to have. That's very little stretch, so you can feel it. Yeah. And another reason why it can be good is, let's say you have a grouper or some type of bottom fish that is in structure, and you hook it and you set the drag and you're pulling it, but the line is stretching, and that can happen with mono. Mono stretches like 20 to 25%. With braid, that's not going to happen, and it's going to make it easier for you to get that fish out with a lot of pressure and turn its head. Once you have a fish's head turned in a direction and they're still turning their tails, it's actually like they're working for you. So braid has very little stretch. It also lasts for a very long time when compared to monofilament. So, I've personally, I own a fishing line company, and I've had braid on some reels for a few years because braid just lasts a long time, and that's a good thing. So, how often should you change your braid? So, it really depends on a few things. It depends on how you're using your braid. Or using it as backing. If you're using it as backing, it's going to last a lot longer because it's not always seeing the water. And that's those reels that I told you about that I had my braid on for a few years. It was a lot of times is because only the mono top shot was seeing the water and the braid was just sitting in the reel. Okay, are you fishing around structure now? If you're fishing around structure, the braid might start to lose its structural integrity, which is the weaves of the braid, and at some other point I can talk to you about the weaves in the braid, but basically if it's rubbing on something, it may be time to change it just because it's going to lose its strength. Do you care how the line looks on your reel? Now, sometimes braid can lose its color, and if it starts to fade its color, that doesn't actually reduce the strength on your line. It just doesn't look as good. And if you're someone that wants all your stuff to look like it's in tip-top shape, then yeah, change it more often. Are you fishing from the beach? Is your braid? Remember that structural damage. It's like your braid getting rubbed by sand over and over and over again. That sort of thing can cause structural damage in the fibers, and it may make you need to change your braid more often. Now, unless you have visual damage on your braid, I don't see you needing to change your braid more than once a year. So unless you see something, then it's up to you and to take the responsibility to say, hey, look, I'm looking at my braid, and it's starting to get worn. It's time to change it. But other than that, I'd probably leave it on there about a year. So what do people use braid for? One of the big applications of braid is vertical jigging, because remember, vertical jigging you're picking the reel up and down and up and down, and if you have this huge reel for vertical jigging to make that action, you would just get tired. You've probably noticed that jigging rods are really light, and you want the reels to be super small, and you're probably dropping your bait super deep. So all those things make braid perfect for jigging. People catch groupers, snappers, kingfish, tuna, wahoo, amberjacks, African pompano, covio, cod, striped bass on vertical jigs, and with braid. So yeah, braid is great for jigging. Braid is also great for deep dropping because it's so thin and it doesn't have a lot of drag on the water, so it gets down there. It's also not neutrally buoyant, so it sinks, but I don't think that's as big of a factor as the fact that it's very thin and has very little drag. So yeah, people will catch vermilion snapper, mystic grouper, yellow eye snapper, queen snapper, Warsaw grouper, and a bunch of tilefish, swordfish using braid because they're really and on the west coast lots of different types of deep water rockfish where you're allowed to target them using braid because braid's great to get down there. So another application is to punch grass for bass. And if you've ever seen someone that's punching grass for bass, they're basically just ripping the lure through grass in a lake or a canal, and often they're using up to like 65-pound braid to catch, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4, sometimes bigger bass, but pound bass. But the reason they're using such strong line is because they need to punch through that grass. So if the lure gets caught on the grass, they need to be able to pull it out and yank it out and break the grass. And 65-pound braid is going to be a lot more strong than grass. We already covered this using braid for daytime swordfish. Braid is also great for sight casting. We started out originally in South Florida, and one of the most targeted sight casted fish to is bonefish. I mean, it really takes some specialization to learn how to catch a bonefish, but oftentimes you're casting at this fish 50 yards, 25 yards in front of you, and you need some accuracy. So having that thin line, especially like a 20-pound braid, can help you to see the fish and cast very accurately at that fish with very little wind resistance. So can braid be used for general fishing? Yeah, remember braid you don't have to change that often. So if you have, once you start getting specialized, you might have a bunch of rods and reels, but when you're first starting to get into fishing, you might have 1, 2 or 3, let's say, reels that you use for pretty much everything. And braid is a great way to go because it might be expensive up front, but it lasts forever and it can be used for pretty much anything. And just buying a very basic reel and putting braid on it, most reels nowadays have the right drags to deal with braid, so why not? You're going to save time and money by buying braid, and it works for most types of fishing. So how much braid do you need? I can't tell you for your specific reel in this video, but on bullbuster.net's website, we have a tool that shows you the braided line capacities for over 1,000 reels from many of the major fishing reel manufacturers. And my one piece of advice for using this tool is overestimate how much braid you need when buying your fishing line online, because once you order it online, it gets shipped to your house. You don't want to have to deal with all the back and forth. So that tool is a suggestion tool. I would always overestimate on there just because that's the nature of how things go. We use the manufacturer's stated line capacity, but they're all rounding out to all the braided line companies, and it's not always exact, so overestimate when you see these numbers. So we have the braided line capacities for Shimano reels, for Everroll reels, for Penn reels, for Daiwa reels, Avid reels, Accurate reels, Quantum reels, Finor reels, and Van Stalls. Earlier I talked to you about structural damage to your braid. And the different braid is a bunch of fibers that's woven together like a rope. Basically, it's a high tech, very, very thin rope. And braid can be made of braids from multiple strands. So I'm talking to you right now in June 2020. So our current braid, all our braids below 40 pound and below are 4-strand braid, and that means 4 strands of fiber are woven together and make up your braid. And we like this combination for these lighter braids because we think of it as giving your braid a little bit of like a nice edge because it's a little bit rougher. And when you get that thinner diameter, you want to kind of be able to cut through something that you were to get caught on. So let's say you were using a really smooth braid that didn't have a lot of strands and you got caught in, let's say you're punching grass for a bass, or on the west coast here we have a lot of kelp. So let's say you got stuck in kelp and you went to yank that braid out and it was smooth, it doesn't have a cutting edge, it's going to be hard to yank out. So in this case, we recommend using a 4-strand braid because it's a little rougher, and that's why we have it for the lighter contests. Now an 8-strand braid is a lot smoother, and that's what we have for 50 pound and above, and that we believe increases the ability to cast your line. It's just with the smoothness, and at lighter pound tests, that doesn't really matter because it's already pretty thin and there's very little wind resistance. But when you get above 50 pound tests, what we've determined is having that 8-strand braid gives it a good cast. And there's also super smooth braids, like a 16-strand braid, and some people have these on, some brands have these on lighter braids, but we like to focus it on our hollow core braid because it just gives it the performance to allow you to do a mono top shot or a knotless connection, which is what hollow core braid is about. Yeah. So that's a little bit about strands. And did you know that there's also another thing is there's 2 types of braided fishing line. There's solid core and hollow core, and I just covered this a few seconds ago. But really, the main difference is hollow core has a hollow core, and it's kind of like a Chinese finger trap, and you can stick mono into it without needing to use a knot. So that's the 2 types of braid. When is braid not your best bet? Are you fishing around jagged structure? Remember, abrasion resistance, monofilament, it's a lot thicker, it's going to be a better bet in this case. Do you need invisible line? Braid is not invisible. Light does not go through braid, so if you're using braid, you probably want to use a mono or a fluorocarbon leader so that fish don't see your line. Alright, well, thank you for listening to our ultimate guide on braided fishing line, and hopefully you learned something new. And if not, you reviewed it and maybe solidified your choice on what fishing line you're going to need for the type of fishing that you're doing. At bullbuster.net, it's our mission to help you spend more time fishing. Have a great day.